Welcome to the Shift Book Club, first one of 2023. You all know me. I'm journalist, broadcaster, creator of the Shift, Sam Baker. I'm really happy Fran Littlewood, author of Amazing Grace. I'll say that again. Author of Amazing Grace Adams, has joined us tonight for the first book club of the year. So, as you probably know, actually, anybody, if you haven't read it or if you haven't finished it, just pop a little note in the chat just so I know and we don't spoil all over the place. It's the story of Grace Adams, a perimenopausal woman whose life is collapsing around her. She's fallen out with her teenage daughter. Her marriage has collapsed. Her professional life is non-existent. She's stuck in North London gridlock on the hottest day of the year, and her rage knows no bounds. Sound quite familiar? Oh, great. Finished it, loved it. That's good.
Well done.
Fran is a journalist, and Amazing Grace Adams is her debut novel. So like straight in at the top. We'll talk about that in a bit. It's a teeny bit inspired by Fran's own experience of parenting teenage daughters while going through menopause, combined with the fury at the way perimenopausal women are represented, or not, more importantly, by mainstream media, which is why we're all here after all. With Grace, Fran set out to redress the balance, and it's had rave reviews from everyone from Red and Good Housekeeping to the Mail on Sunday, Sun and Grazia. And the Times said, read it and weep and then cheer, which I thought was absolutely brilliant. So all hail Grace Adams, and welcome to the Shift, Fran.
Hello.
And the cat is back. Hang on, I'm really sorry.
He's trying to get out. Trying to get out.
I thought he'd gone out and I've shut him in, so I'm just going to throw him out. Sorry, everybody. Go on, go. Come on, go, Vamoose.
Oh, he's beautiful, Sam. What's he called?
He's called Sausage. He's a rescue cat with no tail. And sorry, the long story, we won't go into it now. Just a little bit about the format for anybody who hasn't been before. Fran's going to do a little reading and we'll chat for about 45 minutes, and then you can all turn your mics, videos on, and we'll do a kind of a Q&A session with all of you. So please have some questions, otherwise that will be really embarrassing for everybody. Fran, welcome. Do you want to tell us a little bit about the book and then do a little short reading to introduce it?
Yeah. So yes, it's about Grace. She's 45. She's a polyglot. So she speaks 5 languages, and she's a one-time TV star. And when we meet her, she's hit the wall, but she is about to push back quite spectacularly. So it opens, and I'm about to read that bit, on the hottest day of the year, as she abandons her car in gridlock traffic and she sets out on foot across North London to try and win back her estranged daughter on her 16th birthday. So the narrative kind of spans this single long hot day, which quite neatly is a bit of a metaphor for the menopause as well, but also nearly 2 decades. So it's got kind of themes of love and loss and marriage, family, identity, and the ambush of age is in there as well. And obviously our friend female rage. So yes. And so do you want to, shall I do the reading now?
Yeah, go for it. Let's do that. Sorry.
So this is right at the opening of the book. It's in the present day strand, the now section. Grace is hot. There's the sun like boiled breath on the roof of her car, but it's more than that. This feeling that from nowhere she's been set on fire from the inside out. Between her breasts, a line of sweat is tracking a slow, itchy S, and she wants to jam a hand under the neck of her shirt and wipe it away. It's gridlock though, and she's hemmed in on all sides, and there's the man in the Audi whose car window is level with hers. He's staring at her like she's the distraction he needs in this. Screw you, she thinks. Screw you, screw you, screw you. If you're feeling hot out there today, the woman on the radio is saying, according to the latest report from climate think tank Autonomy, it's only going to get hotter. Grace revs the engine to drown out the words, and her eyes find the clock on the dashboard. 12:23, can that be right? She checks her phone on the passenger seat. Shit, she's late, really late. There's the Love Island cake to pick up, the one she's had specially made, the cake she can't afford but is staking everything on. 1, 2, 3, 4. She begins the CBT count that doesn't work. The half-remembered one from the online course she abandoned after the first few sessions, then takes a deep breath in through her nose. Now her jeans are sticking to her thighs. Grace fiddles with the vents, stabs yet again at the button for the aircon she knows isn't working. It's the cheap heat in the synthetic fabric that's making it all worse, and she spreads her knees as wide as they'll go, trying to get some non-existent air between her legs. On the passenger seat, her phone goes and she starts. Lottie? The thought is automatic that it might be her. But even as she's leaning across to check, she already knows. Instead, there's the shock of a jowly face frowning from the screen. And it's a moment before she recognizes herself, understands that Kate is trying to FaceTime her again. Grace shrinks back against the driver's door. She doesn't want to answer. And although she's pretty sure she can't be seen, Lottie has laughed at her about this 100 times. Still, she has the sense that her sister is somehow watching her. Grace knows already what Kate is phoning to say. She's left a vomit of messages over the past fortnight that somehow managed to be both compassionate and accusatory. Mum called me to say she's been trying to get in touch, Grace. She's worried about you. Dad too. It isn't really fair on them to, listen, call me and let me know you're okay. I mean, not okay, but we're all worried, Grace. There's the blast of a horn behind her and she twists in her seat like it's aimed at her. The traffic is solid, stretching back as far as she can see along the skinny road that runs from the foot of Muswell Hill all the way to the Emirates Stadium. The kind of road that would be better suited to a sleepy village or medieval times, but that's clotted chaotically with work vans and city buses and delivery drivers and SUVs. Really, she says into the void of the car. Really, arsehole? You want us to do what exactly? The sides of the car are closing in on her and she can smell burned plastic. How are they not moving yet? Sitting here like this, it's reminding her of something, a book, a TV show, a screenplay. She can't remember. She can barely remember her own name these days. Slumping in the seat, she tries to bring to mind the things she hasn't been able to recall recently, but of course she can't. It would almost be funny if it wasn't so terrifying, like a part of her brain dropped out when she was looking the other way. Her phone starts to ring again and someone is leaning into their horn. The man is still staring at her, the heat in the car, and something is trapped and buzzing in here with her now. A fat black fly vibrating against the windows. Sweat pops at her temple and she's slapping herself because the fly is dive bombing her, ricocheting frenetically around the car's interior. Suddenly a face appears at the rear window of the car in front. A little girl with a grubby doll clutched in her hand is staring at Grace, unsmiling. She can hear the hiccuping beat of a track on the radio, the bone judder of drilling from the roadworks ahead. And the fly is on her cheek now, on her arm, in her hair, and the traffic still isn't moving and time is jumping forwards in units that aren't as they should be. And she can't be late, not today. There's just no question. And that's it. She's had it. Claggy fumes catch in her throat as Grace steps from the car, gripping her phone and jamming her credit card and a £20 note into her back pocket. It's all she needs. She doesn't want to lug her bag around in this heat. She's wearing the wrong clothes as it is. Too tight denim that makes her legs feel as if they're melting. Grace slams shut the door, points her key and ka-chunk, the doors are locked. And she's walking away, picking a path along the white lines in the middle of the road when there's a shout behind her. Hey, love, what do you think you're doing? She stops and turns. It's the man in the Audi. He has his windows down and he's raising his voice above the blast of horns starting up. She registers the threat in the pulse of the engines around her, the angry atonal soundscape, but she has the strange sense that she's somewhere beyond it, that it's separate from her. You're not seriously, the man is yelling now, gesturing wildly so that she can see the sweat patches under his arms. You need to get back in your car. You can't leave it there. Grace can taste the metal heat coming off the vehicles wedged either side of her as she smiles at him, with her mouth, not her eyes. Deal with it, she whispers.
There is always a bloody man in an Audi, isn't there?
Always.
I mean, I loved Grace from the minute that I read it. I think it was like last autumn when I first met you and interviewed you. Tell us a bit more about Grace. Where does she come
Where
from?
she came from? Well, nothing obviously to do with my own personal experience.
No wish fulfillment going
Barely
on there at all.
related. Yeah, do you know, it's so funny. It started from a place of dark humor, actually. I really kind of loved the humor in this idea of, I mean, for a long time I called her my perimenopausal woman going on a rampage. And I do remember kind of sitting around the kitchen table as I was sort of drawing the idea together with my husband and one of my daughters, and really just sort of cackling away going, God, this is going to be so much fun to write. But then, yes, as I started writing, that idea of her being this sort of action hero, this warrior, this improbable idea. But yes, as I started writing it, I realised that behind the funnies was an awful lot of, you know, personal and I'd say political rage at what we all have to put up with as women. You know, this crisis of violence, and particularly women in the middle of our lives, that all the enormous pressures. So yes, yeah.
It's really interesting because like pretty much everybody I've spoken to has loved it, but there's been a couple of younger women who have been a bit like, oh, she's just in this kind of spiral and she's at the mercy of her life. It's like, and they just didn't like that she was at the mercy of her hormones. And I just think I didn't see her like that at all. I saw her, like you said, as like a hero, someone taking control of her life. And I wonder, do you think that is an age thing? Do you think that that the women who are in that situation, who know the reality of that, are like, yes, go Grace, and the women who are like, oh, I don't want to think about that, you know, are kind of going, oof, it's not like that.
Do you know, I think it's really is a perception of women in this kind of midlife space. I think it is exactly that thing, that we are all supposed to be you know, very much sorted in everything. We're supposed to be calm, we're supposed to have it all set up and have all the answers by now, and we just don't. And I think maybe that it's interesting because I've had younger women sort of in their 20s, and I was quite surprised, saying they felt very seen and understood a lot of the issues. But yeah, I think it's maybe a feeling of, no, you need to be the ones who are kind of in control. And maybe this is sort of saying, actually, a lot of the time we don't feel like we know what we're doing still. You know, I think it's the same in that kind of parenting space. You don't have all the answers. I think, yes, I certainly used to look at, I'm 50 now, and think, yes, by then you'll feel like the adult, you'll know what you're doing. And actually maybe it's kind of, yes, the scales falling from eyes, that actually that isn't the case. And as my granny, bless her, who died last year, she was 101, but she said she was still learning in her 90s.
Oh, good. What was your own experience of perimenopause?
Yeah, so I think for me, looking back, I think it started at about 42. And I think for a lot of women, I think it starts a lot earlier than we generally kind of acknowledge or understand. So mine was a lot of physical symptoms, which I think is actually the far better end of the deal, I would say, than the emotional stuff. And I know, but I should have written more of that into the book, actually, but I know about the emotional stuff because actually for me, I had an awful premenstrual condition. So I had all of that stuff, which I think for me has actually got better with menopause. So that's my sort of silver lining. I think it was switched around a different way. But now I had awful flooding, the awful itching, the difficult itch that I think feeds.
Oh God. Oh yeah, me too.
It's awful. And a friend of mine who actually is the 7-year itch, I think she said it went on for 7 years before she finally, and the thing is, we're all dealing with this alone. And I had no idea it was anything to do with perimenopause, the migraines that you suddenly start getting from nowhere or after one glass of wine. The other one that I found particularly unpleasant, this is like one of those sort of round robin Christmas letters, isn't it? Everyone just about all my medical problems, was that not the racing heart, but this horrible sort of dunky sort of skipping heart, just awful things that, you know, are all, you know, among the many symptoms. But yeah, I had no idea. And I think I went to the doctor about various things, and at no point, the whole kind of medical misogyny thing, did anyone actually say, this could be perimenopause.
It's astonishing, isn't it? Because I know someone else who went to the doctor around in their very early 40s and they were just told you're too young.
Yes, I think I had that about 46, which definitely isn't too young.
And you also had you've also were diagnosed with osteopenia, weren't you?
Yeah, so but not immediately. So I think I was 46 or 7. I've never ever broken anything before, and I broke my elbow so mortifyingly, actually walking along with my daughter and my neighbour who I do yoga with and her daughter. So really publicly felt I had a fall in the street and broke my elbow. And yes, and so I went to see the orthopedic consultant a couple of weeks afterwards, and I mentioned. Oh no.
I've lost you. Have you? Oh dear. So has everybody else lost Fran, or has everybody lost me?
Just Fran.
You just lost Fran?
Yeah.
Okay. We'll just give her a second, see if she comes back. Yeah, I think she's... Are you back, Fran?
My back. Oh yes, I don't know what happened then. Have you got me?
Yeah, has everybody, everyone else? Yep.
And you could,
yep.
Good. So yes, yes. Way after I'd written the book, and it finally made it to the top of my list, and I went and I saw my GP, and I mentioned it again, and I got a DEXA scan, and so I had osteopenia, which I basically could have been treating for 2 years had he said, had he acknowledged that might be a thing. I would have been on the HRT a lot sooner. So yes.
It's just, I mean, one of the things that comes up in all the reviews, and obviously, your publishers basically called it the fiercest book of 2023. And it is, I mean, one of the things I love about it is just Grace's just fucking furious. She's just furious. And I know that I felt like that. And when I was interviewing women for the shift, the thing that came through again and again was just like this sheer rage. And I know that somebody who's here wants to talk to you about that a bit more, but it's hardly surprising, is it, that we get to this point in your life, it all starts to go, if you're lucky, then maybe you aren't going to have those symptoms. But for many of us, it all starts to suddenly go a bit tits up. You feel yourself being invisible at work. You've been suppressing that fury, speaking personally.
Let it out, Sam.
Fucking decades, frankly. It's hardly surprising that we're bloody livid. Why do you think people have so much trouble with female rage? And that's the thing, one of the things I think that has scared a few people about Grace. Yes. That she's too fucking angry.
Yeah.
But that's how we are.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting actually going back to what you were saying about the 20-somethings, and I think of it as a hormonal rage in the book, but I also think of it as a sort of personal and political rage from this kind of personal and political voices, and I think not just for women in that midlife space, but across the spectrum. But I think in terms of the rage being too much in the midlife thing, it's something that I've talked about quite a lot with my agent, is this awful thing of the unlikable protagonist. And just as in real life, I'd say women being held to a much higher standard than men, and this enormous double standard. Female protagonists are also held to this ridiculously high standard. So I think people are uncomfortable with it, and you aren't supposed to, you're not supposed to lose your shit in life. And actually men are allowed to, and that for them is just they're being sort of powerful. But if it's us, where it's the whole kind of all the tropes of crazy come out. But it's time to flipping rise up.
Did you have that experience
of the rage?
I mean, not literally leaving your car in the North London street, but did the rage boil over for you at that sort of point in life?
Oh, absolutely. And I think behind the wheel of a car is one of my worst places to be, getting into that real sort of London cabby mode. So it's those kind of those flashpoints. But I think you're absolutely right. There's so many things crowding in. It is that I just think we're under such enormous pressure that I think there's this simmering rage the whole time that's ready to blow. I think it is, show me the midlife woman who isn't kind of on the cusp of losing it at any point. And I think that being all things to all people, so you're squeezed between, you've got parents who you might be bereaved, actually, as my dad died a year ago, there's that sort of going on, or people with kind of parents who are getting frail. If you've got kids, you're dealing with the head fuckery of the teenage years. And so you're squeezed in the middle of that, and then this kind of whole hell to a higher standard thing that you feel like your kind of mind and body are collapsing, and you should be. I was thinking Grace's case, she's 45 but she's supposed to look 25, and you are supposed to be the perfect partner, mother, daughter, friend. Your house is supposed to be immaculate, you're supposed to look immaculate. It's a huge pressure, and I think there's so much shame and guilt attached to the fact that we will all inevitably fail at all these things, because it is an impossible set of expectations. So I think we're constantly walking around with this guilt and shame that then kind of manifests as rage, and whether or not we, like Grace, kind of show that rage, I think we should be.
So when did you start writing the book? When was it that you were sat down around the kitchen table planning it out? How long ago?
So this one, it was May 2020. So I know it's right at the beginning of lockdown. And actually I had just sent out, my agent had just sent out another book that I'd been writing. But then I pitched the idea of this one. I think they're back now. Why did I do that? I kind of kept going, and she kind of instantly said, I'm really interested in that idea. And I think because it was the beginning of lockdown, the very first one, it felt like everything had been turned on its head. All the rules were being rewritten. So I crazily kind of she said, let's try and write it in 4 months, I think, for the Frankfurt.
Bloody agents, yeah.
And in my mind I thought, well, maybe I will. It was a mess. So I sat down and I did write it in quite a frenzy, absolutely not in 4 months, but I think I did the first draft, I think, in about 8.5 months. But it was this sort of mad situation of being here and not seeing anyone. That was when we were allowed our hour a day, this government sanctioned walk. And I had this sort of 3 girls were here, and I had my 16-year-old trapped up in her room upstairs, and kind of thinking, oh my God, can you imagine being like that, with stuck in a house with your parents at that age? I really did very much feel for her, but it all felt quite acute and quite easy to get into Grace's headspace.
Yeah, I'm not surprised. So on that note, I know that there are at least one person here who was very what's the word, taken with and terrified by that strand, that kind of writing of that relationship with the teenage daughter, which I think is quite rarely written about. People write a lot about parenting, but they don't write a lot about parenting young adults, and it's not written often from the parents' point of view, and that kind of grief of them separating, although, like you say, yours weren't. How did you approach that? I mean, I know you had the inspiration right on your doorstep, but
yeah. That's so interesting, Sam, that you said it, because that's exactly what I had felt. I felt like I'd read these coming of age narratives. I'd read a lot about parenting babies and small children, and that whole thing. Everyone talks about empty nest, but I really felt that sort of from the perspective of a parent looking at kind of a 13, 14, 15-year-old, it had really been under investigated, because it had really ambushed me, that sense of loss. And I've tried to show that through Grace in the book, when she walks into her daughter's room and she's looking around at all these familiar objects. I think there's a pair of earrings and a Buddha and her Stranger Things poster, and she's looking for clues as to where her baby went, her child went, and who this sort of almost stranger in your house is. And it's something that I hadn't expected. I'd expected that in the sort of empty nest space, but not that early on. So yes, it felt like an ambush to me. And so I think I knew I wanted to write motherhood because of my 3 kids. It was something that I wanted to look at, but that real sense of loss, I think, came as I went. I think it was a bit of an accidental theme. It sort of emerged as I went along. Yeah.
And how did they feel about it?
Well, do you know, they haven't. My youngest, who's 13, she read about, I don't know how far she got, about half of it I'd given, and I suddenly remembered quite a lot of the scenes that were in there, and sort of thought, I don't know if this is appropriate, and I snatched it back from her, and she's kept asking me to keep reading it. And actually my 18-year-old has now asked for copy. I think she was really worried that I was vilifying teens in it, which I really hope I haven't done. I tried to kind of be really compassionate about it, and which thankfully lots of people have said. So yes, I'll let her at it soon. So yeah, but they're not that fussed, Sam, to be honest.
Yeah. Not that interested. It's just something mum's done. Yeah. I'm interested that your agent was so keen on the idea, because I mean, when I think we might have talked about this before, but my agent was selling the shift, would have been like, say, the maybe August, September, before lockdown. So I was writing it during the beginning of that lockdown too. And we're still very much at that point where, even though the big book buyers and the big book readers are women kind of 35 plus, it was still very much, the editors were very interested in the idea, but mainly because of Fleabag. And then the sales directors, who are not exclusively, but a great many of them are middle-aged men, were all a bit like, no one's going to read that. Who's interested in like women over 40? So I'm interested that at that point, which was 3 years ago nearly, that your agent was so responsive to the idea.
Yeah, that's so true, and she's absolutely amazing. And then we did subsequently have conversations about that whole likability thing, because I think there is, as you say, I think actually writing a protagonist in her 20s and maybe early 30s as well, I felt you could get away with an awful lot more in terms of the Fleabag style irreverence, and just like I've written kind of the visceral bodily stuff into this, and I do think there is that feeling of, is it a bit kind of unsavory to be writing about that for women of this age? So that, yes, that felt I just felt so strongly that I wanted to do that, and I was so determined. I didn't want to misrepresent the women around us, and I didn't want it to be a vanilla read, and I didn't want it to be sanitized. But yeah, she was really on it, because actually, as you say, it seems really extraordinary to think now, but there was sort of the few brave, courageous women in the public eye speaking. You were already talking about it then, from Mariella, but actually what it was while I was writing, so it must have been the same, that the non-fic books were starting to be announced, so it started to feel then like something quite zeitgeist, and it felt like a movement, which was absolutely brilliant. But yeah, that was such a short space of time ago, really. I always look back and think nobody, including myself, could have defined the word perimenopause then. I hadn't, you'd have to look it up if you'd even heard of it, and that, and that's changed.
It has changed, but you still got the government turning around and going, oh yeah, women work, menopause in the workplace. Nah.
So that was extraordinary the other day, discriminating against men.
Oh, what about the men? Yeah, I mean, do you feel like, there's definitely we've definitely seen a sea change at the moment. Do you think it's a change of the narrative, or do you think it's just a trend?
I think, I'm really optimistic, actually, Sam. We have to be optimistic. I feel like it's I'm flipping thanks to you. This kind of, it does feel like a cultural shift, certainly in terms of the conversation. But the tricky thing is, how do you get that into workplaces? Thinking about places that I've worked, how on earth would that actually work in reality? That kind of tangible cultural shift, that's what's really difficult. But I do think, and I think particularly like in TV and film, I'm thinking about amazing Michelle Yeoh winning the Golden Globe for her. And she is like that sort of kick-ass midlife heroine, and literally in her little jerkin, literally kicking ass. And then Kate Winslet in Mayor of Easttown, and Emma Thompson in Leo Grande, who was exploring that whole kind of desire and desirability and aging. And so I feel like this feels like something new, and it feels like people are talking about it as though it's something new. So yeah, so you have to hope it will. I can't see that it won't continue. There are so many fierce, feisty women who are this age now and who are becoming this age. I'm hopeful. Are you hopeful?
I am hopeful, but when I think I spend too much time on social media, and so when I posted about Viola Davis and Michelle Yeoh and Jennifer Coolidge all winning Golden Globes and all being over 60, you do get the inevitable, yes, but they don't look 60. look how unattainable they look. And on the one hand, I think, well, it's partly their job. And then I think, well, it shouldn't be their job, you know. But also, but like you, I'm inclined to take it where I can get it. And I feel like, how can you not celebrate? I mean, Michelle Yeoh, well, all of them, how can you not celebrate them? But you take Michelle Yeoh, and I really felt like with Everything Everywhere All at Once, I watched that and I thought, that must be how men feel when they go to the cinema, because they're used to seeing characters kicking ass. And winning, and they come out, you know, if you're a bloke, a white bloke, you must come out feeling like, yeah, got it.
Empowered. Yeah, it's true. But actually, actually it's interesting, I hadn't seen that people had said, yes, the inevitable, they don't look their age, but in the film she absolutely does look like a midlife, which she is not a glamorous, you know, woman in the film, as if she has, I say, she's got a little jerkin on, she looks
like she's wearing a gilet.
Yes, I'd call it a jerkin. I might think the only person that calls it that, but no, she doesn't look glam in the film. She looks middle-aged, and so
I think that's the thing, isn't it? It's like, say, take, you know, Girl on a Train. And like, Liz, I'm looking at you to ask some questions about this later. When, you know, I know that character is not really young, but she's, what is she, around about 30? I always did feel like if you put 20 years on her, she wouldn't have been acceptable. She would have been the character in, what's the Zoe Heller book called? Can you remember?
Yes, the older teacher, Notes on a Scandal.
Older teacher, Notes on a Scandal. She would have been the slightly creepy.
Yes, you're right.
That's kind of how I felt. Did you find any inspiration for characters when you were writing? Who did you turn to for?
Marvelously, you mentioned this last time we met, reminding me brilliantly of Bernadette in the Maria Semple book. And actually, yes, because I'd been writing, I think I'd written maybe 50 pages, and then my agent shared it with her US counterpart at Janko Nesbitt, who said at that point, oh, it's giving Bernadette vibes, which was completely amazing. So I absolutely loved that book, and I reread it, and she really sort of veers into the absurd in that, and this is a kind, Bernadette absolutely steps outside of the prescribed spaces, and I felt like once I'd read that really freed me up even more so, especially in that kind of present day strand that I wrote, to kind of really sort of go there and make it a little bit more overblown. And it was so enjoyable, that thing, so that when Grace arrives at the end, she's sort of bloodied and battered with this collapsing cake. And so I think, yes, definitely I kept that close on my desk, and it freed me, I think, really to write it in a more, maybe not a more irreverent way, but just in a more I think it was, that's the absurd element, which was so enjoyable, and that dark humor.
So tell us a bit about how you got from sitting at your kitchen table thinking, I want to write a novel, to here, because you were a journalist with no long form experience, weren't you? So tell us a little bit about that process.
So the journalism that I was doing at the end, I was working at the Times on the personal finance desk, hilariously doing things like having to phone my mum to ask her how to figure out a percentage. It wasn't my métier. So I was a journalist, and then I had my kids, and then it was kind of, I felt like I had nothing to lose, actually. So I decided to do a creative writing MA part-time, and my thinking was that if I didn't manage to get published, I would never regret having tried. Maybe that's a midlife thing, that feeling of you know, giving it a go when maybe you wouldn't before. I just didn't want to have any regrets. So yes, and that was I loved my MA so much. That felt like a real sort of pause in things, and it felt very indulgent and wonderful to be able to just lose yourself in books and writing. And in fact, I remember at the beginning of it, and then sort of saying you have to give yourself permission to write, and me thinking, God, that sounds really quite bullshitty. But actually looking back, I think it kind of did. I had Andrew Motion as one of my tutors, which was enormously intimidating, but he was so brilliant at sorting out my writing line by line, which I did lots of. Well, I think actually, you know, probably as a sort of counter to my time as a journalist, doing your sort of minimal words on the page, I was kind of, metaphors, similes, loads of description. Everyone's going to want to read all this stuff. And he was like, no, people are not going to want to read all of that. So yes, I felt like I sorted out my writing line by line there. And then at the end of the course, they send out an anthology to agents, and so I was approached by my agent from that. So I was really lucky in that sense that happened for me relatively easily. So she signed me on 4 chapters of the book that I was writing then, but then the point from there to actually getting published was much longer for me. So that book was kind of a nearly but not quite, and then I started writing the second one, which was the one that we arced before, as I pitched the idea of Grace at the beginning of lockdown. So yes, I definitely put my 10,000 hours in.
So you wrote 2 books before Grace, or
yes,
one and a bit?
Yeah, well, it's like 1.5. I mean, I had written 2, but the second one we didn't properly send out. But the difference with Grace, I think, is that I was putting humor into it for the first time. So I think maybe that was the other. Helly would describe the other 2 books as quieter books than Grace.
Yeah, no, Grace isn't quiet.
She's not.
And how did you approach the structuring it? Because that kind of, you've got the one day going forward narrative, which is kind of vast and frantic, and then you've got the flashbacks from various different time frames. How did you come up with that and tackle that?
Well, I think so. I knew I had this present strand, and that it sort of did write itself in with the cry for help strand, the rising up strand. And then I just knew that I didn't want to write loads and loads of flashbacks. So I started this past strand back in 2002. So she's 28, Grace, when we first meet her. And I wanted to write that also kind of in the present day, which is why I sort of did it in that kind of moment rather than doing it as flashbacks. So as another whole narrative strand leading forwards. And then the third narrative strand, which is starts 4 months earlier, and the 3 timelines converge at the end. I just seem to remember thinking I didn't think there was any other way that I could do it. So it had to be that way. I think with the things that were going to happen plot wise, that's how it had to be. So yes, that just seemed to come together structurally.
And did you have like one of those planning walls where you've got all the different bits joined up, or do you just wing it?
Oh no, I'd love that, the little post-it notes. I feel like I do kind of, I knew I had my kind of plot points. I sort of had islands along the way, so I knew the points that I was going to get to, I think, and I absolutely had my key plot points for each thing. But no, I think I filled in the gaps along the way. I sort of send myself emails of things, really such a ridiculous system, send myself an email and I'm kind of trying to find months later, I know I'd made a note about this, so as things occurred to me. But yes, I definitely had key plot points figured out, and I knew where it was ending, and I knew the narrative arc. But yes,
it's so fascinating the different ways that writers approach it. Because I was talking to Paula Hawkins about oh god, I've forgotten what it's called now, the latest one.
Yes, is it Slow Fire Burning? I don't know where I
yes, that's it. Yes, it is. And she's got a forward narrative and a backward narrative.
What, so doing?
Yeah, so one narrative starts at the end and works back, which is
amazing.
Maybe it's the novel, maybe it's not. And then she's got the forward narrative, but she actually just wrote them both separately and both forwards, and then wove them in, literally sat down and wove them in together and flipped one around. It's really fascinating, because whenever people say to me, oh, I don't know how it's going to end and I didn't plan all that out, I always think, did you really?
Yes. I always remember it's Reservoir 13, the John McGregor one, and hadn't he written them all out in their individual timelines and then chopped them up, which is
literally just physical, like, which kind of takes you back to like back to my really, really early days of journalism on women's magazines, when I did on like weeklies where I did true life stories. And I literally used to do that. I used to transcribe it all, tidy it all up, and then literally physically cut it up and move it around on the floor. Like, I am 105 basically.
Oh, love working on paper, love it.
I just realized I haven't asked you about the polyglot thing at all, but I'm going to put that aside for a moment, and just want to ask you about the TV rights.
Oh, yes.
So tell us about that experience of selling them to actually somebody who's really going to make it, as opposed to put it in a drawer.
Yeah. Do you think, Sam? I hope so. You don't know. But yeah. So it's sold to Whip. It's he's the exec producer of Mayor of Easttown. So I feel as though it's that kind of, there are parallels to be drawn between the two characters. So I think that's it. Obviously, kind of spoke to them. So yes. So for a mini series, and they have got a writer on board. And in fact, we had this kind of crazy day. She came over. I'm terrible on. I don't think was it this summer? Maybe it was, and it was appropriately on the hottest day of the year when she flew into London, and we did a part of the Grace Walk together, and spent sort of 7 long, intense hours talking about it all. She really, I mean, she's amazing. She obviously really wanted to kind of get a handle on it. So yeah, we spent 7 hours walking part of the walk and ended up on the heath, dangling our feet in the pond, absolutely boiling hot and exhausted, both of us. But yeah, it was a really amazing moment. So yeah, so I think the pilot has been written, but yes, I'm not sure what's happening beyond that, but fingers crossed.
Any dream casting?
My dream, it would just be Julianne Moore. It would have to be. I love that
I love
woman.
her. I love her. I really wanted her to be Bernadette, but Kate did all right. You know,
yeah.
she's fine. Right. I've got loads more questions, but does everybody want to turn their cameras and mics on and have an opportunity to ask Fran some questions? Don't be shy. Come on. Unless they've all gone to make a cup of tea and you and I have been talking to ourselves.
Yeah.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi.
Hi, Kristen. Hi, Ron. And Liz, who's hiding behind her picture. Lizzie, I can't remember, you in Australia or New Zealand, but it's very much beyond the call of duty to be up and here. If you've got a question, just kind of like give me a wave, and then you can ask Fran yourself. Since we're such a small and perfectly formed group, I thought that might be quite nice. Paula.
Hi. It's not a question. I just wanted to say that thank you for writing my character.
Oh.
Because I have been that woman in a car, stuck to the seat, and kind of sweat trickling in various places, unspeakable places. So, I just wanted to say that the minute I read that scene, I was hooked. I could not put the book down. I will be recommending it to, I work in a library, so I'll be recommending it to our book club coordinator.
Yay.
Because a lot of our book clubs are women like me of a certain age. So I think it will be very popular.
Oh, thank you, sir. That's amazing. Because this is, for me, when I read books, it is those moments that chime. It's the relatable things that when you kind of look away from the page and think, yes, that's exactly how I feel. That's what I love about reading. So yeah, it's amazing to.
And on the other hand, I need to be kept away from golf clubs.
Yeah.
We all do.
So thank you again.
Oh, thank you.
Was there a bit of wish fulfillment, Fran?
Oh, flipping absolutely. I mean, it was, yes, that was amazing. And those, before writing those scenes, I was like, yes, I can't wait. And I think that's when you're sort of, I actually want to do the work today. I want to write it. Oh, completely. She's my total fantasy self.
Yeah. Anybody got a question? Kristen? Oh, sorry. Go. Do you want to go first, Kristen? Okay. Nicola, do you want to go then?
Hi, yeah, I was going to say the scene, I don't know, has everybody read the book? I just don't want to spoil it, but when she did use the golf club on the car and stuff, it's just a pure moment of joy reading that, and it's kind of like, oh my God, and even at the end when the police come and taser her and stuff like that, and she's still and despite all of that, she gets through to her daughter, and she has that moment with her daughter, and I think all of that you wrote, it spoke to me of how much shit, you were saying earlier, that we get thrown at us, and yet we still keep going, and we're still fighting for whoever it is, whether it's our parents or our children or whatever. And I just sobbed and cried, and literally my family thought but it was just a beautiful book, and I've recommended it to everybody, so thank you so much.
Oh God, thank you, that's amazing.
I loved it, I absolutely loved it. And thank you, Sam, for getting me a copy.
You're welcome.
Thank you so much. After the taser thing, that was one thing, and I knew from the end that I was going to do the tasering, and I have to say, I was as though I've done it myself. I was so looking forward to writing that. But it is the crossing scene as well, and we've all had it, haven't we? That flipping, it happened to me about 2 weeks ago. So a man driving at you on the crossing at kind of full speed, seeing you, knowing you're there. Yeah, so yeah.
And also the tender moment with the older lady outside the chemist or the shop, I can't remember exactly now, it was a little while I read it, that had me in tears, that scene between the two of them and the interaction between them. It was just that was beautiful. I loved it.
Oh, thank you. I always think of her as she's that sort of fairy godmother that you think of, that the older woman who's kind of gone through it and come out the other side, and the feelings. Please see me.
A question about the book. Will they base it in the US rather than in London? Do you know?
Yeah, well, at the moment they're saying London, and it's interesting you said about Paulika's Girl on the Train. They moved it, didn't they, to the US, which I'd have loved to have seen that as a London film. So
I know, because when you read that and you read it as London, and you know what the train journey is like, going past all the London houses, because obviously I live in London, southeast London, so I can picture that commute. So when it was that other train journey that Emily did, it was like, no, that's not right. So I just wondered whether they were going to still make it. So there's, at the moment they're saying London, but yes, who knows? But I think, and that's certainly why the screenwriter came over, because her sister lives over here. But I think that was one of the things that she was talking really carefully about, wanting to kind of get the Londonness of it and get the nuance, and so hopefully it will stay here. But yes, I don't if it happens, but I'm not sure.
Kristen, do you want to go?
What Nicola was just saying, that scene with the mother with the woman who's working on her feet, and just I have this marked here because I dog ear my pages. Don't hate me for that.
Oh no, books are meant to be read.
I know. But when she says, I know you feel like no one sees you, I'm here telling you I see you, I was sobbing, literally sobbing at that point, because I think I really saw that moment very much this mother that Grace almost couldn't be. I also saw that as a moment where she was kind of shifting into how she wants to be with her daughter as well, because she's quite cold to her daughter. And I think one of the things I loved about this was you didn't hold back on the varying layers that we have in our lives, and how you change. You're such a different person than you were 20 years ago, and 5 years ago, and 10 minutes ago. And I loved her complexity, because I think a lot of authors kind of hold back a bit, but you threw everything at this, and it was really wonderful. I love the fact that I kind of, I love the different layers. And then one of my other questions was going to be about the three timelines and how complex that must have been to work it all out. But I don't understand how the story could have been told another way either, because it was just that. And whenever we got to the present day, I was physically stressed. I'm the one Sam was talking about, because I've got two little girls who are 7 and 5, and their teenage years scared the living daylights out of me. Oh my God, the premonition of what's gonna everything at that, and the fact the worst happened with the Instagram idiot, So it was so deftly done, and it was brilliant. I love her so much. I feel like she's my friend.
Oh, thank you.
Again, rubbish question, but anyway.
No, there's a great
No,
there's
not
so
at
much
all.
I would, but it's really interesting about the complexity, because when I first used to be talking about Grace, I found it really difficult because every bone in my body wanted to kind of leap to her defense and say she is a kick-ass woman, full stop. But then there's this little voice on my shoulder going, but she's quite tired, she's quite overwhelmed, exactly as you say. It's just putting all, and these things that seem kind of like contradictions, but that absolutely coexist in all of our lives. We are all of those different people. It's nuance. Yeah.
But just giving that side of women a voice, I think, is really important. And I hope as you go and speak to people about this, that comes up, and that women feel empowered by her, because she did it for us. We don't have to go and
I'm not the only shit.
No, I think it's like I'm having a bit of a Grace Adams day is going to be the way that we all speak, right?
Grace moment.
Did you still have a question, Elaine?
Yeah, I do. Thanks, Sam. So Fran, just like everybody else here, I absolutely loved the book and loved Grace. And I finished reading it a couple of days ago, but she stayed with me. I think somebody mentioned that she seemed like a friend. And I think, yeah, I've just carried her with me the last couple of days and keep thinking about her, and have been thinking a little bit about the what next for her, because she's kind of stopped at a place where she's obviously doing her community service. She's separated
obviously.
Well, yeah. And her daughter's they've moved back in together, but she's unemployed. There's still kind of lots of unfinished business, I guess, with her life. And I'm wondering if you've got any plans, or have even thought about maybe revisiting her in the future, or whether there's more story to tell with her, in the same way I was thinking about Marion Keyes and how she came back to Rachel. Yeah, or whether for you, Grace's story is told now, and you leave it there.
Yeah, it's so I've had a flicker of thought about it, and I think, and it's interesting, the Marion Keyes thing. I think if I was ever going to do it, it would probably be a decade down the line. So it's like what's going to happen in the next decade that are the things that, yes, I need to get off my chest. But actually, really interesting on the patriarchy thing. Someone in one particular meeting said, you could do the sequel from Ben's point of view. My agent afterwards was like, what about the man?
Oh my God, honestly. No, that's interesting that Marion always said that she wouldn't revisit Rachel for years and years and years. And then I remember we were doing her tour for grown-ups, and we were in Liverpool, and someone in the audience said, oh, will you, can we have another Rachel, please? And I just was sitting there thinking, oh, she's just going to say what she always says, which is, no, I'm done with Rachel. It was one book. And then she kind of went, well, yes, I've had an idea. And it was fascinating, because I think people are going to feel like Grace the way that people felt about Rachel. And people loved Rachel so much that the room just erupted.
Oh,
it's literally, I don't know, I'm trying to think of a good comparison now. I'm not going to be able to think of one, but it was like David Beckham had just walked in. I mean, it was literally everybody went. I mean, probably more, because people care more about Rachel, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
I think Liz is being camera shy because she's just got up, so I'm just going to tell you what she's said in the chat box, because Liz has done representations of female anger in contemporary thrillers from a feminist and psychoanalytic perspective for her PhD. Like, that's not at all scary and brainy. But she says she's so glad to see a furious woman who's not portrayed as pathological. I think that's almost for the people who have had a problem with Grace's rage. I think that probably nails it. That's almost why, because it needs to be portrayed as bad or wrong or.
Yes, yeah, and actually it's funny writing it, and my husband always says this, it was going to be a Marmite book. There were always going to be people who couldn't cope with that aspect of it. Seems really weird to me, I have to say. It just is part and parcel, but yes, yeah.
Yeah, and she also says that her 16-year-old daughter is challenging, but they watch Love Island too. So
brilliant. I know, I feel like, there are great bits too, aren't there, with the teenagers? No, there are.
No, totally. nobody else has asked about the polyglotness. So I'm going to ask you, where did that, tell us where that came from?
Well, funny enough, I saw my 18-year-old the other day, and she's claiming that idea. This sounds so kind of I remember, because I was trying to look for a characteristic that would make her extraordinary, that would make her kind of I wanted her to be an every woman in many ways, but also have that kind of something that made her memorable. And I mean, I love language. We all love language, with books. I did Spanish and French at A level, but my eldest daughter was teaching herself Japanese at the time, which I feel reflects very well on our parenting. A good counter to the rest of it. So yes, I think we were talking about making her a linguist, and then the polyglot thing came out of that. So by committee, it happened. But yes, I so enjoyed that theme of the book. I absolutely loved kind of digging into it. And actually, it's something that, because I worked with the UK editor and my US editor at the same time, which was, I didn't realize we all worked. My UK editor would make edits and then send it to the US editor, and then it would come back to me. And the language angle was one of the things that Amy in the US wanted amplified, which I was so delighted to do. So there's more of that than there was in the original. And I just love that idea, this kind of, I think I had from very early on, this kind of irony of the fact that Grace comes to realize that she speaks these 5 languages fluently, brilliantly, but she can't find the words to articulate her grief, her heart sickness. She can't sort of communicate with her family. And I think it's something that happens so frequently in so many families, especially when things are acute. We can't find the language that we need. So yes, I did really enjoy that aspect, that whole kind of love falling through the gaps in language, and language being inadequate sometimes. Yeah.
Okay, and last question, what are you working on next?
So I'm working on the difficult second album, so it's a book about sibling rivalry. I'm one of 3 sisters, and I've got 3 daughters, and my sister's got 3 daughters. We do a lot of sisters in our family. So again, I thought it was something like, so I'm specifically looking at this taboo of a father that inadvertently reveals that he has a favorite child. And it's so interesting when you talk to people about it, everyone's got something to say on it. So I think, again, something that maybe is a little bit under investigated. So I'm going to try and kind of approach it with that same kind of mix of dark humor, hopefully, and emotion, and dig into that a bit. So yes, that's up next.
Brilliant. That's all we've got time for, I think. Thank you, everybody, for coming. It's so lovely to see you all. I quite like it when it's a nice number like this and we can all kind of get out. Did you all like kind of coming in at the end? We haven't done that before, have we?
No. Yeah.
But did you like that? Cool. Well, if you didn't, message me later and say don't do that again. I hated it.
It was really nice to have you all come in. Really nice.
Oh, thank you, Fran, so much.
Oh,
you're welcome. And good luck. When will you know how it's doing?
What, the Grace?
Yeah.
Well, do you know, I think they Jess emailed me today to say, I think it's number 17. I haven't been, is that what you mean? I haven't sort of been thinking about any of this. I'm completely don't care. It's all an absolute bonus. I'm just very happy to have a job. The rest is about, so I think, I mean, I feel really reluctant to say that, but I think it's number 17. I think it is. Yeah.
Oh, amazing. Congratulations.
Thank you. And I feel like I can't have that many friends and family. Other people must be actually buying it.
Yeah. Brilliant. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for coming. Thank you, Fran, for your time.
Thank you so much, Sam.
I will email shortly with the next book. So look out for that. Okay, everybody. Bye. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.